Hi gang, John O'Brien here, Jamestown Community College, SUNY, jcc.edu, here in the beautiful studios of YMCA Camp Anyasa, where I'm sequestered, as you hopefully are sequestered in your own homes. It's time for History 1510. We've been looking at the resurgence of empire in East Asia. Previously, I asked you to watch a video on Michael Wood, British historian on BBC. Had a video on the fall of the Song Dynasty, the incursion of the Yuan, Y-U-A-N, or Mongol dynasty. So that's where we'll pick up today. We'll talk about the Sui, the Tang, and the Song dynasties. As China was put back together after a period of dissolution that followed the fall of the Han Empire in the year 220. Okay, before we get to that, news you can use. Please keep up with valid, credible sources of news. So here we go, the New York Times. Senate looking to vote on a major aid deal, which would put money in the pockets of Americans, and the intent there is Americans go out and spend that money and put on other Americans to work. Right? So many of our friends and neighbors out of work due to the COVID crisis-induced recession. So we'll hope that puts people back to work, including me. I'd rather be on campus with you. I am working, I guess, but I'd rather see you folks face to face. So keep up with the news. I'll stay off the Facebook news, but I will give you some kind of anecdotal information from my colleagues in China. Things are slowly getting back to normal. They had a very strict clampdown for, I think, about 6 weeks, and now they're able to leave their apartments. They do put on masks. I'm assuming those are surgical masks because the N95 masks are still pretty rare. But surgical masks that protect people the wearer comes into contact with, right? So they don't protect the wearer. They protect the people in his or her presence, right, from coughing or sneezing droplets. But those are being used in public, especially public transportation. But things slowly getting back to normal in China. That's optimistic. Not to be too much of a pessimist here, but the tradition of pandemics is they come back in waves. It's generally not just once and it's over. Once we start to relax, they start to come back again. Of course, that's without vaccinations, and I know we're working on a number of vaccinations as well as treatments for those who are ill. So stay well, all right, stay where you are. The tighter we clamp this thing down, the quicker, at least this wave will pass. And believe me, a wave is coming. If you're not keeping up on local events, 3 confirmed cases in Chautauqua County. It's probably been in Chautauqua County for a while. So stay well, all right, and stay away from other people. Physical distancing, we're now calling it, not social distancing. We want to be social, this is social, but we want to keep our physical distance so this virus cannot spread, okay? If it doesn't, if we don't allow it to spread, it in a sense dies. I know you epidemiologists will say a virus is not alive anyway, but you know what I mean, okay? So there's current events, much more current for us, I suppose. We do have a test coming up, so here is your content page of Blackboard, and come on, people ask me, like, what's going on? Well, make sure your email is set up to receive Blackboard announcements. I'm putting everything out there, the YouTube clips, the discussion boards, the quizzes. There's not a quiz every week. To be honest, I just don't have quizzes for every chapter. I'd never given them for every chapter. The goal was to give 10 quizzes over the course of 15 weeks. So there's some weeks that during which we will not have quizzes. Okay, so don't feel bad if you miss one. I'm going to post more than 10, so we will drop the lowest 2 or 3. Okay, hang in there. Let's all be flexible. There is a revised syllabus. So make sure you're checking that out. Revised syllabus. What's changed? Well, here we are, right? Doing this online. So here's the revisions, exams. The next 2 exams will be take home only, meaning I'm going to email them to you. You'll have a week to complete them. They'll be all essay, but you can only use sources, including these lectures and our textbook, right? Obviously, you don't want to see something cut and pasted from an online source. I don't want to see you copying your roommate's exam. These will be put through a software algorithm that will pick up plagiarism. So let me forewarn you, if your essay is, certain percentage overlap with other essays out there, articles, you're not going to get credit, okay? I mean, that's a dishonest thing to do. So let's continue to work hard even in these changed circumstances. Online quizzes, still putting those up. I am taking attendance through the discussion board. If the discussion board isn't working, email me, right? It's a quirky system, okay? And I'm not that adept at using it for my traditional classes, so let me know if it's not working. But that's how you get attendance credit. Other policies remain in effect. Okay, so like what? Well, there's an exam coming up. March 30th, exam. It's a Monday before spring break. Good luck on spring break. You can't go to Florida. I just use spring break to catch up on your house spring cleaning, I guess, right? But there will be an exam due. I'm going to actually push it back a couple days because I'm giving it to you. I want to give it to you a week ahead of time, and I didn't do that on Monday. I wasn't keeping up with my own syllabus. So I'll give it to you later today in the announcements. It'll be essay-based. Email it to me, send it to me a week from today. Today is March 25th, it's Wednesday, all right? It'll be 3 essays, okay? All right. Let's get into the lecture. The Resurgence of Empire in East Asia. Okay, you got it? Okay, go on. Let's go. So we have restoration of centralized imperial rule in China. What had happened? Han Dynasty had fallen apart. We saw the rise of three kingdoms era. We saw a period of regional kingdoms, 3 kingdoms, and another is foreign invasion, incursion, basically a lack of centralization. The Sui Dynasty in the year 589, wow, that's about 3.5 centuries following the fall of the Han, reasserts organized central rule. It's short-lived. Yeah, it's pretty short-lived, okay, a couple decades in duration. But it does set the stage politically for central rule. In fact, under the Sui Dynasty, the Grand Canal is constructed, linking the great rivers of China that tend to flow east and west. Now there could be trade south to north and also north to south, but especially pushing rice up, redistributing food from the southern rice-growing region to the north. It was done with forced labor, so conscripted labor. If your book says conscripted, it means drafted labor. So no, you didn't have a choice. The government's going to drag you out of your homes and give you a shovel and dig these canals, right, all by hand. High taxes on everyone else. The Sui ruler was assassinated in the year 618, bringing about the demise of that dynasty. In setting the stage, just within a year or two, of the Tang Dynasty. Keep in mind, China's history is dynastic. From beginning of civilization, when we have writing in cities, until 1911, one family of rulers after another. So you could say this is the Tang family, okay? About 3 centuries in duration. Very, very productive and powerful. Taizong Tang, as we might say in the United States, we put the first name first and the family name last. But Taizong Tang ruled from Shan'an, which is kind of in the center of China. It's inland in China. It'll be changed to Xi'an, X-I-A-N. So if you see Xi'an, which was, I've been there, a walled city. The walls are still up. You can walk the walls, very beautiful city. This was the center, okay? And this would be the capital of China for, actually under the QIN, the Qin rulers as well, used that as the capital. So rule from Xi'an or Shan'an. Equal field systems. What does it mean? Big landowners were broken up, and everyone gets a check from the government, $1,200 per person. No, something similar to what our government's doing right now. Everybody gets a piece of land, okay, based on family size and need, and also the growing conditions. Okay, so that works for a while, right? They restore the Chinese civil bureaucracy. So to get a job in the government, you had to be a man. You needed to be educated, which meant you needed to have some money, or at least your village supports your tutorial education. And you needed to pass the exams in Confucian classics, so classic history, literature, poetry, Confucian philosophy. And a criticism that might be leveled at this point, that Confucian learning is already very old. Right? Confucius lived in the 6th century of before the Common Era. From where you and I are, that's 2,500 years ago, right? But even for the people in the Tang Dynasty, that's pretty old stuff. It's over 1,000 years old. And you might wonder, does studying stuff that's 1,000 years old really help you to govern a society a millennium later? Okay? Well, good question. I'm all for the humanities out there, and I study history by all means. But I'm not sure just studying literature, poetry, philosophy that's 1,000 years old or more, 1,100 years old, is the best preparation for dealing with the current situation. Nonetheless, the metropolitan exams on Confucian scholarship will last in China until 1905, right? Which is just a little over a century ago. So we have this bureaucracy of merit. Government officials earn their positions. Civil service examinations. So some of you might be familiar with those if you want to get a job in different levels of government. Tributary relations. So they will expand the extent of China into Korea, northern Vietnam, and force the rulers there to pay tribute, meaning to pay money to the Chinese rulers. It will decline. Rebellion, the equal field system breaks down over time. I mean, this is what happens, right? So I have a lot of land, and then I get your land and someone else's land, and nobody stops me after a while. I pay off the government officials. So the equal field system is this sense of kind of agricultural equality is broken down by the 8th century. Turkish people from the north, nomadic people from Central Asia will make incursions, and military commanders once again take power. Okay, we saw that at the end of the Han Dynasty as well. What happens next? Well, within a short amount of time, a couple decades, another family reestablishes centralized rule, right? Taizu Song, and Chinese it would be Song Taizu, reigned when you see an R, okay, in these slides, 960 to 976, so that means reign, right? Big government, high taxes, because there's a huge bureaucracy. You probably have more people, and again, they're all men, working in the government than needed. It's very expensive. Nonetheless, this was known as a brilliant dynasty. Been to China a few times, and I asked one of my friends there, well, my good friend there, what was the greatest dynasty of all? And he said, John, it was definitely the Song Dynasty. Of course, his name is Song, so I wonder if he's a little biased there. Agricultural achievements, champa rice, right? So rice from Vietnam that can be harvested twice a year. You can grow twice as much food. Guess what's going to happen to the population? Not quite double, but it'll go up. Fewer people needed to farm. There'll be technological improvements, full block printing, carve an entire page of text backward, mirror image, and then ink it, and you can print a page after page after page after page. Rates of literacy go up. That's a bit cumbersome process, right? You're not going to come out with new books every month, like on your Kindle. But it does bring down the cost of books. Paper had already been invented. Okay, another technological development will be made by Taoist monks trying to mix together elixirs of life to prolong life. And what happens? Mix some saltpeter, sulfur, some other ingredients together. Don't try this at home, people. You blow yourself up like the first Taoist monk did by inventing, by accident, gunpowder. Okay? Nomadic peoples of the north, we have the Khitan and then the Yurkin. Remember, nomadic people, they're on the steppes of Asia, these rolling, grassy hills, lacking trees, living largely off the produce of their animals. Well, you might get sick of cottage cheese or horse milk at some point, or goat meat, and you would raid the borders of the civilization. Okay, so nomadic people are on the move to the north, and in fact push northward. The Song Dynasty in the north collapses and moves southward, right? But nonetheless retains this kind of cultural brilliance until 1279, when the Mongols, another nomadic steppe people, that's spelled S-T-E-P-P-E. We're not talking about staircases. The Mongols from northeastern Asia will overrun the southern Song and will enter a new dynasty, the Yuan, right? Y-U-A-N, or the Mongol dynasty, which is another chapter. Okay, they're Genghis Khan's descendants. Before we get to that, right, let's not finish off the Song that quickly, or even the Tang for that matter. Again, this fast ripening rice, as I mentioned before, agricultural implements made of iron and even steel, low quantities of steel. Steel is very, very difficult to make before the 19th century. We get something called the Bessemer process. But it was by adding, I'm not a metallurgist myself, but adding coke instead of coal to the process of much hotter fire, much stronger and lighter metal. Irrigation, in fact, pumps turned by wind that would irrigate land. Population, there we go, it doubles. Doesn't quite double, I'm looking at the years. In the year 600, it's 45 million, yes, if you double years. By the year 1200, it's 115 million, so more than doubles over the course of 6 centuries. People who aren't farming are moving to cities. Guangzhou is the capital of the Song Dynasty. Some things don't change all that much. China remains very patriarchal. When we see patriarchal, we remember Pa is in charge, okay? Sorry for that little clip there, I can't remove that. Veneration of ancestors, so the family, especially extended family, vitally important now. We're extending even beyond generations, beyond this earth, right? To honor one's great-great-grandfather who might help one out in this life by performing rituals, remembering our deceased relatives. What we can't see right here, I'm sorry, if I close it all closed down if I get rid of this, but foot binding, right? So wealthy fathers might basically duct tape their toddler's feet by wrapping with swaddling. So much so that as the girl grows, her foot has no room to, it would curve in upon itself, be deformed and very small. Like, why? Well, it was a status symbol. It was also seen as sexually attractive, right? So a wealthy man might have a wife who can barely walk. And if she can barely walk, she's certainly not out in the rice paddies, cultivating rice. I'm so wealthy I can have a wife who can barely walk. I know, it's perverted thinking, but never on a wide scale. But this will last into the 20th century. It's one of the practices the communist government after 1949 ends. So very patriarchal. What are the technological developments? Porcelain, so the stuff that we call China, so much of it came from, China, that we get the name Chinaware, or China. Very exquisite porcelain creations. Again, iron and steels, we mentioned gunpowder, as we mentioned printing, as I mentioned, the block page, movable type, which will mean instead of carving an entire page of text, remember, in the Chinese characters, alphabet, you had to do it in reverse, which would have been very interesting, using mirrors, I suppose. The idea came to have every letter, if I can call it a letter, every character be a separate block, and then you'd arrange them on a tray. Well, there are 8,000 characters. This is not going to be a very cumbersome process. It might actually be cheaper and easier to use hand calligraphy. And China will largely do that. Block printing is going to be much more economical and efficient and useful once it migrates westward by the mid-1400s, early 1400s, because look, your alphabet has 26 characters, and throw in some punctuation, it's much easier to move those characters around, okay, than it would be to move 8,000. Naval technology, Chinese mariners, Chinese seafarers are moving off the coast to India. There's a quest for spices. Even at this early era, and people want Indian spices, right? Those voyages were made much more productive through the invention of the compass. They knew what direction they were going, at least north and south. Your book says that mariners made it all the way to East Africa.